Game of Thrones ruined Dorne, the Sand Snakes, and the entire Dornish subplot because of the Red Wedding. What? Those two things have nothing to do with each other? Exactly, and that is the problem. I only read the books this past year, so while I was watching the show in real time, I remember the Dornish plot happening in season 5 and being like, okay, that's kind of goofy. So you can imagine my utter shock when I'm reading these books, I get to Dorne, and it's incredible. There is political intrigue. There is a diverse cast of characters. There is backstabbing. There is people imprisoning people. There are murder plots. Well, not murder plots, like kidnapping plots. Crazy stuff. And possibly best of all, you have Arianne Martell, who is one of my favorite characters now in the books, who is the heir to Dorne and like a princess of Dorne, and is just this cool, badass character who takes what she wants and does it however the fuck she wants to do it. She will scheme, she will plot, and if she has to have sex with a hot, big-ass knight to get what she wants, she's gonna do it, and she has no problem with that, and I think that that is incredible and honestly goals. So as I was reading this, I remember being perplexed, just being like, wait, why was none of this used? Because if anything, the Dornish subplot feels like it was written specifically with like D&D and their likes and dislikes in mind. As we all came to realize as we watched the show, D&D have this weird aversion to like magic and the magical elements of the story, which they consistently minimized. And so the inverse of that is they expanded like the political storylines, the political nature of the story, because you could tell that is what they were super into. So if we have this juicy political subplot, which has all the things that they like, the intrigue, the scheming, a female character who uses sex as a means of manipulation, you know, all the D&D classics, then why on earth wasn't it used? Because it comes in the story after they lost interest. So something that's important to know if you haven't read the books is that the Red Wedding, which I know I teased with this thing, but the Red Wedding occurs in the third book, Storm of Swords, like in the middle of the book, and then Dorne doesn't come in until book 4, A Feast for Crows. And this is important because we need to really quickly establish the timeline for how Game of Thrones and the adaptation came to be. So D&D meet with George R.R. Martin about like the possibility of them adapting Game of Thrones and the series into a television show in March of 2006. A Feast for Crows, the 4th book, had only just come out like 6 months ago, so it was still very fresh. So prior to that, the books that, I don't remember, one of them was a fan, D&D, one of them was a fan that like got the other one into it, but the books that they had sat with were the first 3 books. And this is important to remember, not only because, like, that is the part of the story that we know was, like, percolating with them, but also, in the way that George structures it, those 3 books create a very cool arc for, like, the story overall. Because originally George's plan was to do a total of 6 books that would be broken up into 2 trilogies with, like, a big time jump in the middle of them. So the first trilogy was completed, you know, when they were pitching this show, and we'd only just started the next bit. But the problem with the next bit is what should have been the next trilogy ended up turning into what will be 4 books, because George didn't like the time jump, and that's a whole different thing. So you need to remember that, like, this initial trilogy, you know, builds and builds and builds into the big crescendo that, if you're only a show watcher, is basically seasons 3 and 4. So all the big events, the Red Wedding, the Battle of Castle Black, all of these like big storylines come to a close with that book. So with all that in the back of your head, remember that they also did a bunch of interviews, you know, once they were well into the show, talking about how they really wanted to get to the Red Wedding. They hoped that, like, if they could just keep the show on long enough to do that they would have done something really, really cool. Because that was their favorite part. That was the big culmination of, like, the political storylines, or at least, you know, one of the big ones. And so once you get past that point, we are now back in the, like, resetting things up mode. Because George likes to introduce, like, new characters and new POVs every book, and then especially, like, starting with Feast for Crows, which is now, like, the back half of the series, we're doing that, but in earnest. But by this point, like, they have the show that they're interested in, they have the characters that they're interested in, and, like, George throwing in all this new stuff after they've gotten to do, like, the big thing that they were super excited to do, now starts to feel like homework. It doesn't matter that it's really like cool and all this stuff, because right now they got through what they were passionate about, so now we need to start winding things down. And you'll notice that post season 4 is when simultaneously the quality of the show starts going down and we stop like really in earnest introducing a bunch of new characters. Because again, they're trying to condense. They don't want to keep introducing new things like George is prone to do. So while Storm of Swords, the third book, gets split into 2 whole seasons, books 4 and 5, Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, which together are like 1.5, almost 2 times the written material as Storm of Swords, which they broke into 2 seasons, they shoved that all into 1 single season. And the show suffers because of it. So anything that's new that needs to be like established and set up gets like either thrown to the wayside or done really quickly just to wrap it all up. And so Dorne, Arianne Martell, the Sand Snakes all suffer, and it makes me really sad. If you made it to this point of this insanely long video, please throw in what you think in the comments. If you think I'm dumb, if you have things you want to hear my opinions on, whatever, chat with me. Cool. Okay, goodbye.